If you saw my previous video, you may remember that I mentioned how Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was labeled by several people as, quote, anime's answer to Dune. And while I was writing that script, I thought to myself, it's kind of weird that this is the only Miyazaki film that's gotten this sort of label, as there are plenty of other movies in his filmography that I think deserve a similar kind of title. While there are some obvious connections, I want to talk about one that I don't think a lot of people might immediately connect to and to, but if you ask me, I think they're a lot more alike than you think, and it's that Hayao Miyazaki's 1986 sci-fi fantasy adventure and the very first Studio Ghibli film, Castle in the Sky, is anime's answer to Uncharted. Well, I guess calling it anime's answer to Uncharted is a bit misleading since the game series came out well after this film, but semantics, that's besides the point. What is the point is that I know what you're thinking. Really? Castle in the Sky is Uncharted? Come on, maybe I can believe it having a lot in common with JRPGs like Final Fantasy, which, mind you, is the very film that inspired the series in the first place, but Uncharted? Now look, while it may not seem like it, there's a lot of connecting threads and parallels between Castle in the Sky and the Uncharted series. Think about it. They both feature an adventurous main character who are driven by their desire to explore a mythological city that most believe to be simply a myth. They're tagged along by a female companion who want to do what's right at the end of the day. They're mentored by a criminal old person who at first are hostile towards each other when they first meet, but slowly form a parent-child relationship. They're constantly on the run from a villainous bad guy and their military groups that are after the same thing that the main character is after. They reach the Lost City in the final act, which is clearly way past its prime, before ultimately destroying it to defeat the bad guy and save the day. I mean, hell, the pirate colony of Libertalia feels incredibly reminiscent of the look and presentation of Laputa, aside from the whole robots thing, because obviously robots didn't exist back in olden pirate times, but you know what I mean. Anyway, there's just simply a lot about Castle in the Sky that I find so charming and whimsical, because if you ask me, just like say Uncharted or something like Indiana Jones, I feel like this film perfectly captures what I like to call the spirit of adventure, because to me, this feels more like a pulpy action-adventure serial than Nausicaa ever was, because unlike Nausicaa, which was using a Dune-like sci-fi fantasy story to tell these poignant themes about warfare and environmentalism, Castle in the Sky feels more just like a straightforward, almost Spielbergian-like adventure narrative about two kids trying to find a lost city while on the run from space pirates and shady government agents. And this appeared to be an intentional choice from Miyazaki, who himself admitted when given the opportunity to make the film, he was excited by the idea of working on an old-fashioned adventure film that would be, quote, a pleasure to watch, reminiscent of the earlier stuff he worked on, like Future Boy Conan. The film is so straightforward and so prioritized with being fun that it almost kind of stands out from the rest of his filmography, and what I mean by that is that apart from Castle of Cagliostro, this is the only film from him that isn't about something. What I mean by this is that all of his films are clearly artistic expressions from the guy to communicate his personal beliefs, whether it be environmentalism, pacifism, love, motherhood, loneliness, etc., and Castle in the Sky isn't really about any of these things, at least not in a way that was obvious or clear to me. Now that's not to say Castle in the Sky lacks any thematic elements, because there totally are. Themes like greed, desire, pacifism, etc. are the first ones that come to my mind, specifically through characters like Colonel Musca and his motivation of essentially repeating the past mistakes made by Laputa that resulted in its downfall in the first place. But unlike Miyazaki's other films, where the goals and themes are as integral as the story and characters themselves, the thematic ideas in Castle take a backseat to prioritize being a fun adventure romp, which I should also mention, there's nothing wrong with that either. In fact, that's exactly what I love about this film, because it's more straightforward and pulpier than what I'm sort of used to in a Miyazaki film. It helps it stand out from the rest of his filmography, having more in common with something like, say, Atlantis the Lost Empire or Treasure Planet than something like Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle. Sometimes a movie doesn't really need to be this deep existential think piece that really digs into subject matters an artist is passionate about. Sometimes a movie just really needs to be fun. It needs to be full of wonder, full of excitement, something that can pull our heartstrings, and ultimately be something memorable that we can take away with a smile and an excitement to revisit soon, and I think that perfectly sums up my feelings about Castle in the Sky. I mean, there's really nothing I can say that hasn't already been said. The characters are incredibly likable and fun to watch. Shida and Pazu have such great chemistry and bounce off each other well. Dola and her sons manage to pull off being both comedic side villains and secondary protagonists. The action scenes are entertaining to sit through. There's a lot of heart and emotional weight that keeps you invested aside from the big spectacle and set pieces. And all these reasons about likable and fun characters and exciting action set pieces, these are the exact reasons why I love Uncharted, why I love Indiana Jones. But unlike those narratives, what makes Castle in the Sky stand apart is that my favorite scenes in the film were honestly just the quieter moments, the parts that had very little action. And my favorite scene in the whole film is the scene where Shida and Pazu arrive at the garden section of Laputa, and the way they kind of bask in the beauty and quietness of this floating environment, and they see the robot taking care of the animal and plant life even though there are no people anymore, and admire the work it it does. It's a moment like this of not only why I love Miyazaki as an artist, but what about him stands out from the rest of these typical adventure-driven genre pieces. It's that only Miyazaki will take the time and effort to put in something like this, and what's basically at its core just a pulpy, entertaining romp. So I guess in retrospect, I was actually kind of wrong about what I said regarding how Castle in the Sky isn't really about anything, because it is about something, the spirit of adventure. While Castle in the Sky may not boast any action set pieces as something like Indiana Jones or Uncharted, it makes up for that with these quieter moments, with these more human moments where the adventure comes not from the journey, but the people you go on that journey with. Very few films embody the adventure genre as well as Castle in the Sky, because while a lot of these genre pieces nail the spectacle and set pieces, very few can nail the sweet and emotional moments of the genre better than Miyazaki. And so while the guy hasn't really made a film like this since, it still shines like a beacon, reminding us that as grumpy and old manny as the guy can be, he can still be just a kid at heart, looking for that spirit of adventure as much as Shita, Pazu, Dola, and the rest of the characters are looking for in the film.